there are a whole bunch of people who couldn't be here, but who want to see the recording. So now we have that. And I'm now going to share my screen with you. That's not what I want you to see. And let's bring this up. Okay, and we'll make this very small. So I think it's important to start from the Torah itself. Because as we look at Rosh Hashanah and we think about it, we have to start here to know what the Torah says this day is. And so this is from Leviticus, it's chapter 23 and it's verse 24, 23 and 24 actually, but we're looking at 24. God speaks to Moses, Daber el b'nei Yisrael lemor, speak to the Israelites and tell them, b'chodesh hashvi'i be'achad lachodesh yeh lachem Shabbaton zikron tru'ah mikra kodesh. So this is the only thing that the Torah says, actually. It says it twice also later on. This is the more complete statement. So in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you should observe a complete fast. In Hebrew, that is Shabbaton. And then it says a sacred occasion, Zikron. Zikron is a hard word to translate. It's translated here as a sacred occasion. Some translations are a memorial. It's really hard to translate, but it's important, as you'll see. And then tru'ah is loud blasts or Torah sounding. Mikra Kodesh, a holy occasion. So we're told several things about this day. The first is that it is on the first day of the 7th month. And that, of course, raises immediately the question of, wait a minute, it's supposed to be the first month. Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year. That idea that the year begins with the month of Tishrei and not the month of Nisan. If you start from Nisan, which is what the Torah itself says is the first month, and you count 7, you get to Tishrei, which is the month that we are in. So how did it become the first month of the year? If you look at the Talmud, the Mishnah, actually, in Rosh Hashanah, it tells us that there are 4 different calendars for Jews, and one of them begins in Tishrei, which is the calendar of kings. That is a secular calendar. And in fact, the month of Tishrei, the name even Tishrei, comes from ancient Babylonian. It has to do with the Babylonian calendar. Remember, the Jews were exiled to Babylon in 586 before the Common Era and adopted the local calendar, including the names of the months. So in Babylon, it was the first month of the year. In addition, according to Rabbi Eliezer in the Talmud, the world was created in the month of Tishrei, and that makes it the beginning in some sense of time. And so even though it says the 7th month, it is today the first month of the year on the first day of the month, which of course is the new moon. And it is Shabbaton, a day of complete rest. And then Zikron, the root here is Zachar, which means remember, remembrance. So if we say that Yom Kippur, and that's one of the names of Yom Kippur, is Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance, that will become important, as you see in the liturgy. And finally, Tru'ah, a day of shofar blowing, of course, is the thing that we know most identified with Rosh Hashanah. It is the shofar blowing holiday. We're not given any reason for why we blow the shofar in the Torah. And we come to the shofar service in a few minutes. I will give you some of the answers that have traditionally given for the meaning of the shofar. Now, just to jump ahead, Ba'asor Chodesh Hashvi, on the 10th day of the seventh month is Yom HaKippurim, a day when you practice self-denial and you bring an offering. So 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the 10 days of repentance. It does, Kippurim means atonement, the day of atonement, and the idea of afflicting your soul, literally, or practicing self-denial, of course, is where we get the idea of fasting. More about that next in 2 weeks when I talk about Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to stop at this point before we get to the Machzor itself. Any questions on the biblical verse or how we've come to understand it? Sandy, go ahead.
So it says a day of complete rest, like Shabbat, yet you can cook, right?
Right. So a day of complete rest. Shabbat is the classic example of that. And complete rest, meaning you don't go to work, right? And all of the other Shabbat regulations, with the exception of one thing. Rosh Hashanah is a day like the pilgrimage festivals, right? Pesach and Shavuot and Sukkot, when the main distinction between them and Shabbat, well, there are two, but one is that you can cook. So even though it says Shabbat Shabbaton, a complete Shabbat, as it were, there is that exception. And the other exception is that you're allowed to carry. Traditionally Jews don't carry from inside outside on Shabbat unless you have an Eruv around the community, making the whole thing like one person's house. But on a holiday like Rosh Hashanah, and not like Yom Kippur, but like Rosh Hashanah, you can cook and you can carry. Other than that, it is a complete rest. Sandy, go ahead.
Well, who made that exception? In other words, if I just read that, I wouldn't see it. Did the rabbis make that
Yes,
exception?
the rabbis are the ones who define what work is. And then for a variety of reasons, they come to the conclusion based on their analysis of verses that these holidays are an exception and one can cook. And if you think about it also, if you wound up with what we sometimes do, which is a 3-day Yom Tov, right? Where the holiday might be Thursday, Friday, and then Shabbat comes immediately, it'd be very hard, particularly in a time without refrigeration or anything else, to have your meals prepared for 3 days, 3 full days. So I think there was a pragmatic aspect to it, but they also were able to find it in the sources through some creative reading. Any other questions about this foundational verse before we get to the liturgy? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is again share my screen, and this will take me a minute, so bear with me. So first we're going to oh, great. So how do I do this? I need to get, all right, I can minimize this, maybe I can close this actually, and can minimize this and go here. And okay, so what I've done here is let me just get up to the top of it. Let's try to eliminate this. Should I move this? Okay, so what I want to do is start with the Amidah. The Amidah, which on Rosh Hashanah, of course, is said first in the evening, and then on the mornings, and then in the afternoons, and then in the evening. And one of the things, if you think about holidays in general, and Rosh Hashanah in particular, What we have is a liturgy, which is similar to the daily liturgy, except it is expanded. That is, things are interjected into it. Some changes are made in it, but it uses the basic framework of the daily prayer services. So I want to look at the Amidah first, and this comes from a prayer book, which is called Sidur Chadash, or the New Prayer Book. It's no longer new. It is was created independently, and you'll see in it, it's not quite a traditional prayer book, uh, but it was easy to get a copy of and to reproduce, and that's why we're using it. And if there are important variations, I'm going to mention them. So it is also not in the egalitarian prayer book. So we have Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, not Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Hayal Agadol, Gibor, Norai, Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Konei Kol, Zohir Hasdei Avot, maybe Goel Livnei Bnei Ham, all Laman Shema B'Yava. All of that is what we find in every Amidah, and then we come to the first thing that is added. Zochreinu l'chaim, melech hafetz b'chaim, my favorite Sefer Chaim. Okay, so remember us for life, the King who desires life, and write us or inscribe us in the book of life. So here we're really right into the themes. First of all, God as Melech, as King, and the idea of Malchiot or kingship is completely imbues the High Holiday liturgy. This is the day Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur also. These in these editions will continue from Rosh Hashanah through the 10 days of repentance, Aseret Yemei Tshuva, and right up to and through Yom Kippur. So God is Melech, God is remembered as a king, and Rosh Hashanah is the day of God's kingship. Remember, God creates the world on Rosh Hashanah, and actually, according to rabbinic tradition, Rosh Hashanah is actually the sixth day of creation, which is when God creates humanity. Having created humanity, subjects, if you will, then God becomes the king. So it is the day that God becomes king, and every anniversary of God's becoming king becomes a kind of coronation, a reminder of the king's coronation, and there's a ceremony. I would point out that according to ancient Babylonian religion, the first day of the month of Tishrei was celebrated as the day that the god Marduk became, that was the day of Marduk's kingship, and it was recalled each year on that day. And so it seems that Jewish tradition has taken that idea and made it its own, and begin to see this as the day of God's kingship. Of course, but in our understanding, it has to do with creation and with God creating a world, and therefore God having subjects, and therefore God being a king. So this idea of God's kingship, again, we'll see throughout, okay? God who wants life, God who's pro-life, and because we are concerned, as we see in the next line, in being inscribed in the book of life, we have this image that there is a book in which all of our deeds are written, and we want to be written in a way that we will be granted life. In rabbinic terms, eternal life, because there's life after death, but life in this world principally. And then for your sake, O God, you are the God of life, or the living God. Okay, And now we go back to the regular liturgy, right? This is just something that is inserted. Melech Ozer Moshiach, Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, or in today, Upokei Sarah. Okay, next insertion. Mi kamocha bal gevorot mido melech melech meimidu mechayel matzmiach Yeshua, traditional Amidah, and then we add mi kamocha or mi chamocha actually av harachamim, who is like you, God, who is compassionate. So Cher Yitzurav, who remembers those you have created to life with compassion. L'chaim barachim. So here we are calling upon God's compassion. Remember that there are two ways in which we can think of God. God is just and God is compassionate, right? There's a wonderful midrash that had God created the world through justice, no one could survive, right? But because we're all flawed, and therefore we rely on God. God creates the world, and at the same time, God commits to being merciful. And here we're saying, in a sense, even if we don't deserve it, we ask you to be merciful. And then we go back again to the traditional liturgy, V'nei manatah l'chayot metim, right? Now, we moving on to the next section. Here we have again what we would expect, Atah kadosh imcha kadosh, right? You are holy, etc. And then we get three paragraphs which are added to the Amidah on the high holidays, both on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, starting with the evening service the night before Rosh Hashanah. And there are three paragraphs that begin uvechen, and therefore. And you can English, view all your creatures with reverence for you, that all be fashioned with awe of you. May they bow in homage to you and unite in one fellowship to do your will wholeheartedly. May they acknowledge, as we have known, that yours is sovereignty, the power, and the majesty, that you remain supreme over all creatures. So, first of all, this is addressed to all God's creatures, that is, all humanity. And it's worth noting that the high holidays are really not about Jews. The high holidays are about all of humankind. We are remembering when humans were created. This is a universal holiday. It's only observed by Jews, but its concerns are for all humanity. Now, on the first day, if we go to the first month biblically, the month of Nisan, and then we have the holiday of Pesach, right? Pesach is completely a Jewish holiday. In fact, if Rosh Hashanah is about the creation of the world, Pesach is about the creation of the Jewish nation. It is as a nation that we leave Egypt. So Rosh Hashanah is universal and Pesach in particular. Now, the language of this first paragraph actually is very familiar, or the theme, I should say. It looks exactly like the second paragraph of the Amidah, of Aleinu, right? We want all human beings to have awe for you, bow in homage to you, and unite to do your will. So the first additional request, since you are king of the world, we want everybody to acknowledge it. And then we'll move from the universal to the particular and give honor to your people, right? In other words, Jews should be treated, the Jewish nation should be treated with honor, and those who revere them should have glory, and those who seek you, hope to those who seek you, confidence to those who trust in you, grant joy in your gladness in your city, and then bimhei rabbi amenu, quickly and in our day. So this is a kind of messianic plea, but it's a plea for Jewish dignity, that Jews should be honored, that we should be recognized among the nations. So God should be recognized by all the nations, come together by agudah echad in one. An agudah is actually a bundle. In one bundle, all bound together to do God's will. And now we turn to the Jewish people, and then we have this idea, v'chein tzadikim, and then the righteous will behold, and they will be glad, and the upright will have joy, exalt, and the pious will rejoice in wickedness will be silenced, evil will vanish like smoke. When you remove the dominion of arrogance, ki ta'avir mamshelet adun min haaretz. Right. So this is about really, again, echoing the first paragraph, but it's almost messianic. It's about joy and rejoicing and song, for evil has been banished from the world. And so we start really the major interpositions in the Amidah with these three paragraphs. Later on in the Amidah, we will also have Zohrenu L'chaim, Melech Hafetz V'chaim, Kadvenu, right? The last paragraph will also have some more of this. I want to look at the Kiddush for Friday night. Actually, before I do, let me stop sharing for a minute. And any questions about this, about the Amidah, how this works, what's been added? Sandy.
Well, one mentioned three things, if that's okay. First, the English, when you, at the very beginning, when you said it's not egalitarian, what you were reading, the English did have Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel.
Oh, did it? That's odd. Okay, I was only reading the Hebrew. Thanks for
Yeah, I know,
pointing
I know. I was like, wait a minute. Yeah. And second, there's a background noise. I don't know if it's coming from you or somebody
It's
else.
somebody, yeah, I think it's Walter. Could you silence, please?
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't think
Just
it's me,
where it
but
says audio on the bottom left of the
it says
screen.
mute.
Yeah, just mute. That's it. You're good. I think it's coming from you. Okay. Any other? Yeah,
I,
Sandy.
I didn't. Yeah. Can I ask you one more thing?
Yeah.
So you've taught us that God teaches us in the Torah different attributes. First, God um, clothes us, clothed Adam and Eve, and then there was hospitality, and then God buries the dead, buried.
Right.
So what you showed today, I first time I saw that also the attribute of being merciful, and there's the expression that rachamim b'nei rachamim, that we are
Right.
merciful and children of the merciful. I'm
Right.
wondering if that sort of came from that part that you showed us today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a reflection. The idea that Jews are rachamim b'nei rachamim, the idea that we are merciful people who are the descendants of merciful people, I think is a reflection of a value that we seek to imitate God in a variety of ways, and I think that's one of them. Um, and we have to say, Chalavai, would that it were true for all Jews that they are merciful people. Okay, if nothing else, I'm going to go
Thank
back.
you.
Yeah, go ahead, Myra. You have to unmute, Myra. Myra, I can't hear you. You have to unmute. It should be where it says audio on the bottom.
Okay, I did it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my question is very general. Where does the Amida come from? How did it get into the service?
Right. Okay.
Why are we saying it?
Good. Okay, so very quickly, the Amidah is a rabbinic composition, a very early rabbinic composition. We say it really on a certain level, we say it because we no longer offer sacrifices, right? The Amidah comes as a replacement for sacrifice. So we talk about what's called in Hebrew avodah shebalev, the service of the heart. right? As opposed to the service, the avodah, which was the temple sacrifice. And then I think it really encapsulates major Jewish concerns that we want to ask God for, either or acknowledging in a way what's going on, which is a weekday or a holiday and so on. So those concerns, particularly on weekdays, where we talk about Rafa'inu Adonai v'nei Rafeh, heal us and we will be healing. So a lot of it is praise for God, petition to God, right? Asking for things, and thanksgiving. Thank you for giving us all that you've given us. Basic Jewish themes incorporated together in the Amidah. Okay?
Was this the rabbis who put this in?
Yes. Yeah, it's not biblical. In the Bible, there is no formulaic prayer, right? There are individual prayers. We see this on Rosh Hashanah. Hannah prays, right? She asks God to give her a child. We see that. We see also Jonah praying out of the belly of the fish, right? These are individual prayers. We're told that Isaac prays for for Rebecca, rather, because she's childless. So we see that. It seems very early that the Psalms were used as prayer, but this idea of formal prayer, structured prayer, certain things that are said regularly at specific times, that's completely rabbinic. It's not biblical Judaism.
Okay, thank you.
Remember, though, that our Judaism is not the Judaism of the Bible. It is the rabbis who created what we do. We are rabbinic Jews, or in the language of the New Testament, we're Pharisees, right? Not just rabbinic Jews, but a particular kind of rabbinic Jews. Okay, I'm going to go back. We don't have that much time. Let me again share. Okay, so the next interposition first Kiddush, right? So we have the regular Kiddush for holidays. We mentioned that this is Titem lanu Adonai Eloheinu bi'ahava. You've given us with love. Yom HaZikaron Hazeh, this day of remembrance. Remember, the Torah talks about Zikron Tru'ah, a memorial day of shofar blowing. And then we are going to go on here, Yom Tru'ah, a day of sounding shofar. But look in the parentheses, Zikron Tru'ah. This is said, the Zikron is added on Shabbat. Why? Because we don't actually sound the shofar on Shabbat, so we have the remembrance of the sounding. Why don't we sound the shofar on Shabbat? Because then you might be, if you felt you needed to sound it, you didn't have it, you'd have to go get it, and then you would carry it. And as I mentioned, carrying is not permitted on Shabbat. And so we get in that idea, the idea that as much as we talk about the high holidays, Shabbat trumps Rosh Hashanah. And then it goes on. It's Mikra Kodesh, a holy day. You have chosen us from all peoples and sanctified us. And then we get, unlike the other holidays, we get this statement, Udvarcha emet v'kayam. Where is it? Your word is truth and endures forever. So this acknowledgement of God's truth, that we don't see the whole truth, only God sees the whole truth. And when God judges us, of course, we want God to see the whole truth, not just the bad things we've done, but in fact, everything that we've done, even the things that we aren't aware of. And then we end, God who sanctifies Yom Yisrael and Yom HaZikaron. All right, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Yom HaZikaron. Now, ordinarily on Shabbat, it would be, first of all, Baruch Atah Adonai, Melech al kol haaretz, right? The God of the entire world. This again is the universal theme. Ordinarily, on Shabbat, for example, we would say Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Blessed are you who sanctify Shabbat. Here, it's King of all the earth because we're thinking about God's kingship on Rosh Hashanah. And then it's Mikadesh Yisrael, you sanctify Israel. And then Yom HaZikaron meaning Rosh Hashanah. Why is Israel put in between and it's not there on Shabbat? God establishes the time of Shabbat. Every seventh day, God rests. But in fact, the calendar is determined by the people of Israel. And in antiquity, it was determined based on sighting the new moon. Later on, it's fixed, but people who saw the new moon would come to the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem and they would say they saw it, and the Sanhedrin would announce the month has officially begun. So God is Mikadesh, sanctifies Israel, who then sanctifies the day by determining the calendar. And then we have at the end, Havdalah, if it's Saturday night, ignore that. And then we get a very familiar blessing, right? Shechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lasman hazeh. Blessed are you who has kept us in life, sustained us, enabled us to reach this day. The Shechianu blessing actually is not about doing a mitzvah, though we often say it in connection with a mitzvah. For example, the mitzvah of shofar blowing, we talk about the shofar service. We will look at the fact that once the blessing over the shofar is made, we say Shechianu. But it doesn't necessarily have to be over a mitzvah. In fact, what it is a Thanksgiving blessing that we have lived up to this moment. That is to say, we have lived in order to see another new year in this case, and we're grateful to God who has enabled Vehigianu, who has enabled us to reach this day. And Shechianu, despite the fact that we often say it, for example, at a bar and bat mitzvah, that wasn't its original meaning. It was really about things that are seasonal. Another year has passed. And we say Shechianu when we sit in the Sukkah for the first time. Anything that you would do not once in a lifetime, but on a repetitive basis, that's what Shechianu was about. And in this case, the Shechianu over Kiddush is really, you've enabled us to come to this moment. We'll see on Yom Kippur that Shechianu is said over Kol Nidre. And Kol Nidre is not a mitzvah. It's a tradition. And if Sephardic Jews don't even do it, but more about that when we come to Yom Kippur in 2 weeks. Okay, the last thing I want to say about the evening of Rosh Hashanah, and in fact every service, has to do with the Chatzi Kaddish, the full Kaddish, the mourner's Kaddish. And as you know, instead of saying, Yitraf Yishtabaf Yitrumay V'Yitnaseh V'Yitadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal Shmei Dekudesha B'Richu Le'ela mean Kol Birchata. We say Le'ela Le'ela. So what does that mean? God who is, here it says, Le'ela would mean above all praise, hymns, and songs of adoration. In other words, God transcends whatever language we can use to praise God. God is above that and more than that. And here we have a sense of God's transcendence, which is throughout this holiday season, even more profoundly, we're more profoundly aware of it. God is extremely high. God is beyond everything. God is, after all, the creator of the world. So we remind ourselves, and I have to say, it's hard to do this initially. Every year we come around to this, and I'm saying Kaddish, and I say Layla, Layla, right? And I think one of the purposes of this is actually to break us out of these routines and to remind us that we're in this sacred season. All right, so I'm going to go on to the daytime service rather quickly, but before I do, let's just Any questions about what I've talked about so far? Sandy, Saul first, then Sandy.
U'devar ha'emet v'kayam la'ad is also in the final blessing after the Haftarah, so it appears quite often.
Yes, it continues through, but again, specific to the holidays and to Rosh Hashanah. Yes. Anything else, Sandy?
So, excuse me. It's the third summer in a row that we've gone to Asbury Park in the summer. And when we got there, Dina was just overwhelmed with the ocean and just broke out with Shahakianu. She just
Right.
started saying it was beautiful.
Right.
And the other thing is, if the synagogue has an eruv, what's stopping the? Can't you blow the shofar on Shabbat? I mean, on Yom Kippur.
Yes, in theory you could, but not every place has an eruv, and once you say you can, it's very hard for people to say, well, they can do it, we can't do it. How does that work? And so this became a tradition. I will tell you one thing. So the shofar was blown in the temple on Rosh Hashanah, right? But not outside the temple. When the temple was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai leaves the besieged temple, makes a deal with the Romans, and he goes to Yavne, and he establishes in Yavne what becomes the first yeshiva, and it's really the transition between biblical and rabbinic Judaism. So they get to Yavne, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's students say to him, should we blow the shofar? Can we blow the shofar? Because in the temple they could play it. This is in some sense the replacement in some odd way for the temple. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, well, blow it and then we'll discuss it. So they blow the shofar and then they say, we discuss it? He said, we've already blown it. There's nothing to talk about. Right. So, I mean, in this, we have the idea that Yochanan ben Zakkai wants to establish that Yavne and rabbinic Judaism, by extension, is the equivalent of the temple. However, in terms of Jewish practice, it doesn't go that way. All right. Later yeshivot and everything else. So it's more about the moment and Yochanan ben Zakkai's desire to legitimize rabbinic Judaism and put it on the same level, if you will, as what happened. Okay, let me share again. Okay, so one of the things about the morning service is that we have not just in little lines interposed in the Amidah, but we have how do I get this down? Oh, that's how. Okay, but we have piyutim. These are liturgical insertions into the service right after the Amidah or before the Kedusha. And I'm just going to show you two of them. Our prayer books don't have as many as you could. If you look at an old machzor, a complete machzor, you'll find lots and lots of these piyutim. Even the Silverman, which was used by conservative congregations for generations, had more piyutim, but they are poetry and they are meant to enhance the service. They have this one. It was written by a great paitan, a great poet named Khalil, sorry. And you can see it has a repetitive structure and it follows the letters of the alphabet, right? This is Adonai Melech, God is our king. And so the first stanza begins Aleph, then Bet, then Gimel. And then they've left out some stanzas so that there is a Daled, Hey, Vav, Zion, and so on. And then in addition to that, we have very poetic language. So saints and sages joyously proclaim, right? Yeah, Diru B'Kol, Adonai Melech, God God is sovereign, and then we go, God was sovereign, God will be sovereign, God is, was, and will be sovereign forever. So this theme of God's kingship now in this piyut, and then we're going to go to the next theme, this piyut, Le'el Orech Din. God is the author of judgment or who arranges judgment. L'bochein levavot b'yom din. God is the one, first of all, Le'el Orech Din, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalid, Hey, and so on. So again, alphabetical acrostics. And this is Yom Hadin, or the season of Din, the season of justice. God is judging all the world. And so we have this idea of God as a judge. Okay. Now, at the end of Shacharit, we have, if it's not Shabbat, we have Avinu Malkeinu. So why not on Shabbat? In general, we don't have petitionary prayers on Shabbat. These are a series of petitions. And it's not strictly true. If you look at some of the Amidah for Shabbat, there are elements of petition there. But in general, we don't have petitionary prayers. And since this is God, we're asking God for something, right? That God should shlach refuah shlema l'kol amecha, send complete healing and so on. We don't do it on Shabbat. Now, it is something that was actually originally from fast days, and fast days where people were praying for rain, but it was adopted for the high holidays, and we see language in it that is specific, and I'm looking at these verses, right? Katvenu b'sefer Chaim Tovim, Avinu Malkeinu, Katvenu b'sefer Chaim Tovim, write us in the book of life, of good life, write us in the book of redemption, write us in the book of Parnassah v'Halkalah, which is, where are we here? Sustenance, right? A good living. Write us in the book of Zechuyot, our merits, and in the book of forgiveness, right? And then we go on asking for redemption and so on. These verses are repeated by the congregation, just these verses, and they are on the themes of the holiday. Moving along now, before we get to Musaf, I want to talk just briefly about the shofar service, which is, in fact, the key to the holidays. There's not a lot of liturgy there, so I just want to talk in general. The first is, why do we sound the shofar? It doesn't say why in the Torah itself. A great medieval philosopher, actually early, not even medieval, it's 9th century, Saadia Gaon, and I'm going to read you what he wrote. He gives 10 separate reasons. One is accepting the kingship of God, announcing the beginning of the period of repentance, reminding us of the covenant at Sinai when the ram's horn was heard, reminding us of the warning words of the prophets, reminding us of the destruction of the temple and the alarms of battle, of the binding of Isaac, causing us to tremble and do the will of God, reminding us of the great day of judgment when the horn will be sounded, reminding us of the gathering of the exiles and the revival of the dead. All of those have some connection in biblical text to a shofar. And Maimonides, who I like the most, says that it's a kind of alarm clock. It's supposed to wake us up from our mundane lives and cause us to step away and to consider where we are. Maimonides said, "Wake up your sleepers from your sleep." Right? Don't just go about your days routinely. Figure out what it means to live a purposeful life consistent with God's will. I like that the best, although the connection to the Akedah, to the ram's horn, the ram that is sacrificed in place of Isaac, is extremely important. We'll see it reflected elsewhere because one of our fundamental pleas on the high holidays for God's mercy, we say, if not for our sake, for the sake of our ancestors who were loyal to you, for the sake of Abraham, who was willing to sacrifice his son for you. Right? So that accrued merit rather, for their descendants. Okay, in a minute, I'm going to move on to the Musaf service. Before I do, I want to pause once again. Questions or comments about Shachrit, about these piyutim? One thing I will say about the piyutim I forgot to mention. They don't have a lot of content. They're very clever linguistically, right? Really interesting word structure and unusual words, and of course the alphabetical crossings. But most of all, I think they're the attempt to create a state of mind. They're meditative. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Vayed. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Vayed. Again and again and again to put us in a different place. And so the words are less important than the feeling of them. One other thing I didn't mention, I should mention in that connection. One of the most distinctive things about the holidays is the melody, right? You hear that melody. If you're in shul on the night of Rosh Hashanah, the first night, right? Melech HaKol Haaretz, right? That die, da, die, 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 da, die, die. I have a terrible voice, but I hope you get it, right? Immediately you hear that music, that specific nusach, the melody to which the Torah is chanted, all of it immediately puts us in a certain place. Certainly Kol Nidre, right? Very specific melody. You hear it and you're there. So I think these piyutim have the same power through their repetition. Questions on anything up to now? Saul.
Couple things. The PU team and the Sephardic Machzor are completely different, and
Yes.
the Hebrew is much better. It's much better Hebrew. Number two, in the traditional Sidurim, like the Birnbaum, there are PU team right after the Baruch Hu too, in between the
Yes.
Baruch Hu and the Shema.
Yes.
So
There are liturgy, sort of modern liturgy, and this is true in many synagogues of all denominations. They've chosen piyutim, right? There's an enormous wealth of piyutim, and it was never, an individual congregation would choose one or another. But what we have is a very stripped down liturgy. Really, really is. And the Sephardic liturgy has always been different. And one of the differences in terms of Sephardic liturgy is that the Chazan chants every word aloud. And often every word is repeated by the congregation. It's a different style of davening. Of course, they wouldn't call it davening, they'd call it tefillah because davening is Yiddish. But you understand what I'm saying. Good points. Anything else? Okay, on to Musaf. Again, sharing. Where is the screen share? There it is. Okay, so the introduction to Musaf, go away. The introduction to Musaf is Hineni. The Chazan, this is a prayer which is not said. Well, let me go back to the shofar service for 1 second. I forgot to say something. The bracha, lishmoa shofar, to hear the shofar, is actually said by the shofar blower and not by the congregation, even though the blessing is not to blow the shofar, but to hear it. The shofar blower, like the chazan, serves as the congregational's representative. The shofar blower says it on behalf of the congregation. He too, or she, has the obligation to hear the shofar, and he says it, and then Shechianu again, first time that the shofar is sounded in the new year. The Chazan prays on behalf of the congregation, although we individually pray. But remember, in a time when prayer books were extremely expensive and rare, it was often the Chazan who did the praying and the congregation who just affirmed it by saying Amen. Now, before Musaf, and often, a different person would pray Shacharit and then Musaf, and Musaf was the big deal. If you were a Chazan, that was really where you put your effort. This is a prayer of humility. The irony, of course, is that many Chazanim make this, a great deal out of it. They want people to be impressed with their Hineni. But actually, the meaning is exactly the opposite. The meaning is, here I stand, and I am deficient in deeds, right? I've come to plead with you on behalf of Israel who have sent me. I am their shaliach, and I am unworthy of this, right? And by the way, in the traditional liturgy, he mentions that he may not be old and have a long beard, very male, right? In any event, so what is he doing? He's asking God to help him or her, if it's a chazanit, as they seek mercy for themselves and those who sent them. Don't blame them for my sins, says the Chazan. May they not be blamed for my transgressions. May they not be shamed. Accept my prayer as though I were supremely qualified. Right? So this is, and then it ends, for you, hear the prayer of your people Israel in mercy, and you are the one who hears prayer. And now we go on. There are three important sections in Musaf. One of them is Malchiot. They're the three themes of the holiday: God's kingship. The second is Zichronot, from Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance, God who remembers. And then the third is Shofrot, because it's a day of shofar blowing. And Malchiot begins with something extremely familiar. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, right? All of that, which actually is taken out of here and used in every service of the year. As we end with Aleinu. Aleinu first thanks God for making us Jews, that we bow before God, who is the King of Kings, unlike the others. And then the paragraph, which is, and therefore, right, we believe in you, and we want everybody else to do that too. And you should fix the world, the Takein Olam. This is Tikkun Olam, by the way. That's where it comes from. B'malchut Shaddai, under the kingship of heaven, right? And then we have a series of sections, each one where we talk about God's kingship in the first one. And then we have a series of verses, first from the Torah: God shall be sovereign forever and ever. The Lord was enthroned, so on, all verses about God's sovereignty. And then first from the Torah, and then from the psalmist, and then from the prophets, and then we have, because this is God is King and God's unity. One of the verses from we end with a verse from the Torah, which is Shema Yisrael, and now we get at the end a long paragraph in which we ask God to establish sovereignty over the world, God's majesty over the earth. All who dwell on earth should know your power, purify us, lead us to mitzvot. And it ends, Baruch atah Adonai melech al kol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael v'yom hazikaron. Right? You who sanctify Israel and Yom HaZikaron. And then we have uh, yeah, we have in addition to we've looked at where are we here? We've looked at Malchiot, but there's a similar section for Zikronot, where verses of remembrance, and then Shofar, where we have various verses about the shofar sounding, also biblical, prophetic, and from Psalms. Uh, it's also traditional to sound the shofar at the end of each of these sections. And halachically, that is the most important shofar sounding. It's not during the Torah service. We do it then, and we say the blessing then, but it is the soundings after each section. And having mentioned that, I should also mention something about the notes. Oh, and by the way, individuals, when they go through this, in some communities, everybody has a shofar, and when they finish each section, they sound their shofar. But certainly, when the chazan is doing it with the congregation, the shofar is sounding each time, so that over the holiday, the shofar is actually sounded 100 times. Now, there are, as you know, three different blasts: Tekiah, Shvarim, and Trua. They're called out, and then they're right. Tekiah is a sort of longish blast. Shvarim is three shorter blasts, and then Trua is t t t t t like that. And they all each has a significance. Tekiah is the frame, right? Everything starts with Tekiah and ends with Tekiah. And it reminds me, I don't know if you've heard church bells, right? If they're sounding the hour. So first you'll have a series of tones, and then you'll have, let's say it's 9 o'clock, so there'll be 9 specific different tones, and then the first tones repeat again, setting it off, right? So the Tekiah sets things off, and it is, in some sense, a proclamation of God's kingship. It's like a trumpet being sounded before the king. Shvarim is like sobbing or brokenness, right? Because we are to come before God with brokenhearted, aware of our shortcomings. And then Trua was actually a call to battle. And you see that in the Torah itself. So we are going into battle here, and that battle is, of course, not against external enemies, but against our internal enemies as we try to overcome whatever inclination we have to do evil and to do the right thing. Okay, so having done that, we come to Unatana Tokef. There's a lot to say about Unatana Tokef, and we're out of time. And it does appear also in the liturgy of Yom Kippur. So I'm going to save it for then, because I do want to talk about it. So I'm going to end up with just one other thing, and that is Hayom Tomseinu, right? This is the very end of the service. And it's really a series of statements. Give us strength, bless us, help us to grow, be mindful of us. It's a kind of coda at the end of the service. And then, of course, Amen is a way of affirming it. Each time we say, may that be, and may that be, and may that be. And then finally, draw us closer to you. All right. for our good, and then blessed are you, the traditional ending, blessed are you who creates peace. Having done that, I'm going to stop. Any final questions? Walter, unmute.
All right. First, let me wish you and Mrs. Warmflash and everybody in the group happy, healthy New Year. May you all be inscribed and sealed in the book of life. I hope I got that one right.
Yes,
Okay.
and you
I,
as well.
thank you. Okay. Now, just between you and me, and this is for you, I have been a teacher for many years. I was a professional English teacher for over 40 years. I would have begun today with the Utana Tokev because that prayer stands out like a star, like a comet. That's the prayer in which we realize how mortal we are, how susceptible we are to death. We get into a car and we're driving 60 miles an hour, and the guy on the other lane is driving 60 miles an hour in the other way. And one little slip, one kind of, he went to get his cup of coffee and the wheel moves. That that to me is like galvanizing. That to me is like, that's where you gotta, I think put the emphasis on the mystery of life. We live in a mystery. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't know
Yes,
what tomorrow is going to be. So we huddle together as Jews, and we say this Untana Tokef, and it resonates. It's very powerful because we realize how weak we are in the face of so much. So I don't know. As one teacher to
yes.
another teacher,
So I will have more to say about that next week. I will say that one of the paragraphs in the Unitarian Token, which is particularly, I think, striking, is where we talk about us ourselves. We say to God, we are a fleeting shadow, like dust, like a dream that disappears, right? That idea that life is so short, right?
exactly that.
Yes, and that is really the major theme of the holidays. And but more about that next week.
All right, two weeks.
Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, Saul.
Yeah, maybe you could bring this up next time. There seems to be a little controversy about La'ela, La'ela, and La'ela Ula'ela.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'm going to make a note of it.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, yeah, okay. In order to do that, I will have to research it myself because I don't remember. La'ela, La'ela, or La'ela. Ooh, okay, will do. Sandy.
I just want to thank you so much for showing us where the differences are in the regular liturgy and where things are added, because that to me is always something that I don't know, that I forget.
I'm glad to have done that. I'm going to go because I have another Zoom actually, which started a couple of minutes ago. So let me go, and I will see you all in 2 weeks.
Thank you very
Okay.
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Shana Tova.
Shana
Shana
Tova.
Tova.